Hello, everyone, whoever is there. Hello, everyone. We're gonna be starting in 5 minutes. So get ready and slowly get over to here. The meetup will take place here. So see you soon.
So I'm gonna make this place yours.
So hello, everyone. Welcome again, and please come in here. We are starting very soon. Thank you. So, hello and welcome everyone to the first in-person event of Product Tank Prague in like roughly 2 years or so. So we are super glad to have you here on site. And we are really looking forward to this event. We are very happy that many of you decided to come. That's great. I would like to first thank Pipedrive for hosting this event, which is great. The fact that most of you, it was very difficult to drag you from the bar over to here already means that this event is like pretty good, right? So thank you very much, Pipedrive, for having us and hosting us this year. Yes, thank you. And I would like to ask you one question. Who of you got to know about this event or is coming via the meetup.com group? So hands up. Who? Okay, so it's not everyone. So please, whoever don't know about our meetup.com group, feel free to join it, find out about it, and this is where we organize all the events. And most likely we're gonna be sharing a survey after this event. Great. So that's everything I have to say at the beginning. So let's start with the program, and I would like to ask Pavel, the other Product Tank organizer, to start with the first talk.
Hello everyone, I'd like to introduce you to Kostas, who's a celebrity from US. Actually, he's now connected from US, but he's from Greek. And he's gonna talk about product marketing in SaaS and in product related to data. He is also running a podcast, the Datacast, and I really recommend to at least try some of the episodes in there. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Music, everywhere. So that's it, and I'll give the word to Kostas.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. So, oh wow, have quite a crowd there. Nice. Hi, everyone. I'm Kostas. I'm a little bit jealous, I have to say, because it's been a while since I was in a real meetup, being able to interact with people because of COVID, obviously. So I'd love to be there. Unfortunately, I'm a little bit far away. I'm in San Francisco. So here is morning, so I'm having my coffee. So please have a bit more beer also for me after the talks. Now about me and my plan about this meetup today. So I'll start like in a very traditional way. I'll tell you a few things about myself, where I work, what I am doing, and I'll get into a little bit more of details around product related topics. I don't have a presentation, and I did that, to be honest, on purpose. My experience, especially as the host of the Data Stack show, is that I really prefer, let's say, the topic to organically, let's say, progress. So I'd love to interact as much as possible, as much as the medium that we are using allows us. So I'll do some pauses and ask for questions, and hopefully these questions will guide the conversation and make it more interesting. Now, if that fails, I promise I'll come back and do a proper presentation. Okay, so failure is okay. I mean, I'll come back. Now, let me start by sharing a few things about myself. So, as I said, my name is Kostas. I have kind of interesting background with product because I didn't initially start a career in product. My training is in engineering. I'm an electrical and computer engineer. I was working as a software engineer for quite a while, around 10 years, when I decided that I wanted to start a company. So in 2014, I started the company in Greece. The name of the company was Blendo. it was one of the first vendors in the space of cloud ETL or ELT, as it's called today, category of products. And it was a very interesting journey for two reasons. One, because I decided like to build a product in the company that was mainly competing with other products in Silicon Valley, although I wasn't in Silicon Valley, I was in Greece. And Greece is not, let's say, the most developed country when it comes like to tech companies. And the other is that I decided like to start building a product that the market didn't know about the category. So it was like really, really hard like to go out there and like convince people why they need the product that we were building or get even feedback about the product, right? That made it like a very interesting, let's say, product development experience. Now, the company started in Greece. I had to move to Tel Aviv in Israel, where that's where actually like the initial steps of growing the company happened. Came back to Greece, and fast forward into 2020, the company got acquired. After the acquisition of the company, I joined another company in Silicon Valley this time. The name of the company is Rudderstack. I joined there at the very early stage, and I joined as the head of product. So I was actually the second leadership person in the company. And I came with a very entrepreneurial mindset, obviously, coming like from building a company. But my focus was on the product side of things, right? I stayed at Rudderstack for 2 years. I helped like to grow the company from the pre-seed stage where I joined, got it to the point where we raised our Series B, and then I left and I went to Starburst Data, where I am right now, where I work as a group product manager. And my focus here is mainly on Trino. Trino is an open source project on which Starburst is based. But I'm a group manager, which means that like, because the Trino project fuels all the different product lines that we have. So it's a very fundamental part of like the company. But it has also like a very strong open source dimension. Now, all the products that I have worked so far are deeply technical. They are data infrastructure products. The first two products had to do with data pipelining and how we can build, let's say, a SaaS kind of experience around delivering data pipelines and managing data pipelines. Starburst is a little bit lower in the stack. It's actually a query engine. I'll talk more about that like in a second, about what Starburst data is, but it's like closer to a database system. Okay, so my whole experience is around like building products that have to do with data, infrastructure products, and mainly the users are pretty technical. They are engineers, right? So that's why like I decided there are like a couple of different things that we can discuss, but I wanted like today to focus like on three, let's say, aspects of building data infrastructure products that I find like quite interesting from a product perspective. The first one is like who we build the products for and why these might be a little bit different compared like to more, let's say, traditional SaaS products. How things get a little bit more complicated, assuming and the landscape, the market landscape. One of the unique characteristics of like data and infrastructure products is that in most cases, they don't really work on their own. So there's like always like a big ecosystem of other vendors and products out there that you have to play well with them in order to start delivering value. And that complicates things because you have like to start thinking not just like of how you deliver through the product value, but also how you do that like together with other vendors, right? So I want like to spend a little bit more time on that. And then I want to spend a little bit time to talk about what's the role of products in a company that builds developer tools and infrastructure. I think product is like has like a very unique and interesting and pretty hard, I would say, role, but important in these companies, which is yet not very well defined. It's still like something that we're trying like to figure out. So I'd love like to share my experience so far in that, and obviously like hear back from you if you have like questions or your own experience there. So that's about me. I live in San Francisco for the past like 3 years. I'm originally from Greece. Yeah, that's, I think that's a good introduction.
Anyone have a question? We have QR code for Slido on the wall, or we have some papers in here. So feel free to scan the code and put your question in the Slido, or just raise your hand and I will hang over the mic to you. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I'll make sure to make some pauses at some point and like give you time, guys, like to ask questions, okay? So let me tell you a few things about Starburst, okay, before I start and go deeper into like the topics that I mentioned. So Starburst is a company, it has been like around for a while. It's a startup. We just raised our Series D about like 3 months ago. We raised like around $250 million at the valuation of 3.4, if I remember correctly. Hopefully I do, otherwise my CEO is going to be angry, but anyway. We have 2 main product lines, okay? One is what we call SEP, which is an enterprise solution, and it's a data lake query engine. So what we do is that we provide, let's say, the infrastructure that like really big corporations, and when I'm talking like really big, I'm talking about like Fortune 50 to Fortune 100 companies here in the United States, like companies like Tesla, VMware, Bank of America, like this kind of companies. They take our software and they use it to query their data lakes for analytical workloads. And when I say like analytical workloads, I mean like they we expose like an interface for SQL to users to do like dashboarding and like all the standard stuff that you see like in BI use cases. The software scales like extremely well. That's like one of the reasons that's like it's so let's say loved out there. We can easily scale like to petabyte scale of data. And there are like some unique characteristics that the product has, especially like around something that's called like query federation. That makes it like a very good solution, especially like for large enterprises that they have legacy systems to manage data. Now, that's the enterprise solution that we have. And then we also launched a cloud product line. So we have something that's called Starburst. Sorry, not Starburst, Galaxy, which is the cloud offering. And it's a lakehouse engine. So it's pretty much like a way that you can build on top of your data lake, or even if you don't have like, let's say, data lake and you want like to build like a data lake or lakehouse architecture in your company, you can use our cloud solution to do that. Obviously, these 2 product lines, they address different market segments. So there are huge difference when it comes like to both how product operates and also how the go-to-market motions are deployed out there, right? So that's another topic that's very interesting. Maybe we will have like the opportunity to talk in the future of like how product changes in nature when you go from like a very enterprisey way of operating to offering like cloud solutions. So that's about Starburst. Now, Starburst is based on an open source technology that's called Trino. It's the continuation of something that was in the past called Presto. You might have heard of that. It came out of Facebook. So also like the main committers and the founders, let's say, of Presto from Facebook have joined the company. They are the CTOs of the company. And we continue like working on Trino, the open source solution, which we use then to build our product lines. And that's where like I'm heavily involved. I'm taking care of like anything that has to do with like the open source project that we have, and how we can ensure that whatever we do there has the maximum possible impact, both on the enterprise product line that we have, but also like the cloud product that we have launched. So I'll make a quick pause here. That's like a very quick introduction both to myself and the company where I work right now. Any questions or anything that's like it's not clear and you would like to ask something?
Yeah, we had one question on Slido, which I don't remember because the computer is locked. I think that the question was about what's the biggest challenge in product management when it comes to PM team organization.
Can you get the microphone a little bit farther?
Yeah, I will. What is the biggest challenge when it comes?
Like there's a lot of noise and I can't hear you very well when you talk.
Okay, I'll go to the other side. Is it a bit better?
I think so.
What is the biggest challenge when it comes to the PM team organization?
When you go from an enterprise to cloud?
I think it's about the team, like how to organize the product management team itself.
Yeah, the change that happens like through what? That's what I didn't understand. Like because what I mentioned is that there is a change that is happening. I mean, when you're building like a product for enterprises and when you're building like a cloud SaaS solution, like the way that product interacts with both customers and also like the teams internal is like very, very different. Okay, that has to do with both, let's say, how you can get feedback and how you can explore and like figure out what to build at the end. And also with how like the go-to-market motions are like actually happening. So when we are talking about large enterprises, and I'll break it into like, I'll give you like some examples like from both like differences there. So let's start with like how product is different. So when you have when you're working with large enterprises, you usually have like a very small number of customers and solutions need to be very, very customized. Okay. So you pretty much have to, let's say, have some kind of like basic offering that you have there. And then your job, like as a product manager, is like to work together with the go-to-market teams that communicate with the prospect or the potential customer out there to figure out exactly like how the product should look like to fit their needs. Okay, like Bank of America and Pfizer, like they have like completely different, let's say, needs when it comes like to how a query engine should operate or what data they have to work with and like or what kind of infrastructure they have, right? So when you're like a PM in such an environment, you usually have, let's say, you work like with a smaller number of customers. You might even have just one in many cases. But there's like a very intense communication that is happening with them. And you always need to balance, let's say, how the requests that are coming from this customer will affect whatever else has to be built for other customers, right? But it's really, really hard to say no there. That's like, let's say, the main characteristic of like working with these contracts, with these big customers. So on the other hand, if you're building like a cloud solution, you don't have that much of like direct contact with your customers. Like you can, but it's much harder, right? Like you're building probably like self-serve experiences. Like you hope that people will come and they will activate on their own, or they will try like to figure out on their own how to use the product, right? And hopefully you're going to have a larger number of users out there. So the tools that you are going to use are going to be different, and the communication channels and the amount of noise that you have, like from the feedback that you will get, is going to be like much, much higher, right? Now, the extreme case of that is when you build like a B2C product, right? Where you might have like thousands of customers. And then of course, like obviously, like as a product manager, you rely mainly on analytics to figure out how to go and like what to build. Now, when we are talking about B2B products, and more specifically about like data infrastructure products or infrastructure products in general, okay, you will never have like B2C volumes of customers, right? So it's like a kind of in between like the B2C experience and like what you have with with large enterprise. Now, as a product manager that has started and was building products for enterprise, moving from that experience to going and like trying to build a cloud solution takes a lot of like, let's say, change to happen, both in how you communicate internally, but also like how you interact and understand, let's say, value and try like to both discover value and also communicate value, right? What I have seen like working, I mean, in a fast-paced company where you pretty much like, okay, you don't really have, let's say, the luxury of taking like a product manager from an enterprise account and trying like to give them the time and the resources to learn how like to build a cloud solution. You pretty much have like to build two separate teams. So that's how like I've seen it working so far. And even in these cases, like it's pretty challenging. Like for companies to do this, let's say, change in going from an enterprise market to a mid-market through cloud and vice versa, it's like a huge change that takes time, and it's pretty hard both on a personal level, like as a product manager, but also like as a company at whole. Like there's like a whole, let's say, cultural shift that needs to happen there.
Thank you. Any more questions from the audience? Not right now.
No? Okay. So, all right. So let's move forward. And let me tell you about who are the users of data infrastructure and data related products. And I'll also give you like a description of like when we say data infrastructure, like what we talk about, right? Because there's like a huge amount of vendors building solutions right now and a lot of innovation happening right now in anything that has to do with data. So obviously, I mean, you probably know that like data has been around like since we had computers, right? Like database systems is one of the first things that like we developed as humanity, right? Together with compilers. So building like systems around like managing and processing data is not something new, right? But there are things that have changed a lot, especially in the past decade, that are forcing, let's say, the market to respond to that and build like new systems and new infrastructure to manage like these challenges. Now, there are like two main reasons, like two main things that happened. One is cloud, right? Like, so cloud became something that is like out there, and every company or every user can have like cheap access to a lot of infrastructure. And the other is SaaS, right? Like a lot of software happens and got built like the past decade on top of the cloud. And what happened with that is that pretty much like every company out there like has access to software that generates a lot of data, right? So now we're at the point where we are like, okay, we have created like all this infrastructure where we pretty much like, let's say, every need that the company has been digitized in a way. We have CRM systems on the cloud, we have support and ticketing systems, we have marketing platforms, we have pretty much every function has been like somehow automated and digitized. And all these functions that create like huge amounts of data that ideally we would like to take and use them to drive the business and make it like data-driven and more efficient, right? So we have more data. We have data that has been spread like all over the cloud, right? And we also have a need from the companies like to figure out how they can differentiate and compete by using like this unique data that they have. So as this happened, the people behind like these data products have also changed, like their roles, right? Like we used to have like database administrators. You don't really hear that much anymore, right? So now we have data engineers, we have data analysts, we have ML engineers, we have data scientists. We have the infrastructure people who have like to maintain this infrastructure. And we also have like a new category of like people out there that are called analytical engineers, right? Now, all these different roles, they pretty much coexist inside the company. Like, and the bigger the company is, the more like, let's say, the boundaries between the different roles are clear out there. But each one of these roles has like a different needs around like the products. They have different technical background. So the way that you expose the product and what kind of experiences you are building are like different. And even if, let's say, you could manage and build like products that can work very well for all these more technical personas, you still have the problem that at the end, the data is a product itself that is consumed by people who are, let's say, the domain experts inside the company, like a marketeer or a salesperson or a RevOps person or a marketing ops person, who are not technical at all, right? So no matter what we do and like how much we focus on the engineering, let's say, persona, we always have to keep in mind that at the end, like the end product of whatever we do is going to be consumed by a completely different persona. And that's like what makes, in my opinion, data-related infrastructure like a very challenging and a very rewarding experience when it comes like to building and designing products and experience around that. So what I have, let's say, experienced like around that is we have like the market right now, it moves like towards a direction where the engineering persona is becoming more and more and more important, right? And we have started discussing, and like maybe you have also heard about, like, as we were saying, user experience so far, and that we are designing user experience and doing research around user experience and all these things. Now we have something new that's called like the developer experience, DX, right? So how do we build tools that are, let's say, good tools and increase the productivity, and they are easier like to be used by engineers? And that's something that's like, it's pretty new, and it needs to happen in tandem with whatever we do with like the user experience itself. Because as I said, we still have to deliver an experience at the end also to people that are not technical, okay? And this is like one of the things that really complicates how you build these products and how you deliver them like to the end user. Now, let me give you like an example of what like, let me give you like a little bit more information on how like developer experience is like different than user experience. So when we are building like tools for developers, we have like to think of like how like a developer works, right? Like, and the way that like developers work is like obviously like completely different than like any user that is like a salesperson who's using Salesforce. Developers have like a completely different way of like thinking. This has to do with like the fact that their job is like to solve problems. So they have like a problem solving, let's say, approach in whatever they do. So whatever they do, they need to, it pretty much has to be as an experience, like a learning experience, right? So you have stuff like documentation, right? Which, I mean, we always say how important documentation is as part of like a product, especially like for SaaS products. But when it comes like to developers, like documentation itself is like a very, very big part of like the product experience itself. Like you need to have that there, and you need to have it like in a way that it's not just like dry enumeration of what the product can do, but also like drives a learning experience where like they can figure out how they can solve the problems that they have, right? They don't interact with the same modalities. So user interfaces, for example, are not that important, right? They're using CLIs, or they spend most of their time like either between like a terminal and their IDE where they do development. So whatever we do, whatever we build, we need somehow to integrate it with this, right? So CLIs are becoming like more and more important. There's like a whole, let's say, discipline built right now, developed, which is about how we can build experiences through a CLI, right?
Let me
There are
jump-
also like some companies that are doing like some amazing job, by the way, out there. Like if you check like PlanetScale DB, for example, you will see that when you go to their landing page, like the first thing that you get exposed to is a CLI. That's like a very good example of like how a company is like, let's say, developer first, right?
Let me jump in for a moment. We have like 5 minutes to the questions, so just a reminder that we will need some time for the questions at the end. That's it.
Okay, yeah, so cool. And the other thing that is like extremely important when it comes like to developers is the community. That's why you will see that there's like a very strong, let's say, correlation between open source projects, which are always like community driven, and developer products. And also, like, if you think about like places like Hacker News, places like Stack Overflow, for example, which is like one of the first places that the developer or engineer would go like to find like a answer to a question, right? These are like communities again. So communities also are like part of this experience. Now, the reason that I'm saying that, and I'll stop after this to answer any questions you might have, is that when we are building like products for developers, like the way that we need to think, and also like the people that we need to interact with inside the company to build the products are different, right? We need to think of how we can integrate with IDEs and how we can develop and deliver experiences through a text environment, right? We need to have like very good integrations with other systems. We need to have like very good documentation, which means that like we need some kind of information architecture team to be there and like work with them. And then we'll also have like to work very closely with like DevRel teams, right? And these are like mainly, let's say, teams that usually we consider them as part of like go-to-market teams, right? So I promise that I will talk also like for couple of other things. It took longer. So we focused mainly on like how to build, let's say, like developer tools, which is obviously like about the personas. Any questions around that? And like, did you also have like experience working around that? Like, I don't know, guys, like your background and like how and what kind of products are you working on, but
we have 4 questions for you. So I don't consider them being connected with developer experience, but yeah.
Thanks. So, hey, Andre here. I'm also working in a data analytics company, and we're kind of, let's say, neighbors. I'm working in embedded analytics, and I wanted to, agree that developers are important, but I also wanted to ask you, why do you think they are important? Because I think this is like one of the most interesting pieces. And, before I let you answer, I will, give something from my side. We believe that developers are extremely important in the evaluation phase. Like when company is weighing the decision to buy or not to buy, we see that they are having more and more say in that. Is it the same for you? Is there more reasons why you believe developers are, super important? Or, yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So the thing with developers is that there are like some problems that, I mean, they cannot be solved like without having like a technical persona involved in the whole like process, right? Now, think about, and we didn't have like the time to go through, let's say, how a data stack looks like, right? But you said you're doing like a bidding analytics. And if you remember, like I mentioned, that in these products, you always have like at least like two different personas. Like you have the engineers and you also have, let's say, the marketeer or whoever like consumes like the data, right? Now, there is like a piece of infrastructure, like a part of the infrastructure there that is like only engineers can take care of that. Like when you have like pipelines, when you have, let's say, you need to manage a data lake or you need to manage like a data warehouse, you need to have at least some technical skills involved there. And usually these are like brought in the game like by developers. Now, the big problem that we have is that we don't have enough engineers, right? And I don't think we will ever have enough engineers. So the question from a product perspective is like how we can find the right balance there, right, to maximize the impact that a developer can have in the company, but at the same time enable like non-technical people to work with the data, because at the end it's not just about like storing the data or like moving the data around. Like we have to do something with the data, right? Like otherwise, there's no value there. So that's like the reason that I think, like in my opinion, like engineers are like important, is because no matter what, there are always going to be some parts of the infrastructure needed in working with data that's going to be like extremely technical, and you will need like to have the engineers that like to do that.
Okay, thank you. Second question, maybe from Andrei again. I don't know. Hi, you have mentioned that the product manager job is not well defined in the data infrastructure or in SaaS. Can you please elaborate?
Can you repeat the question, because there's
Yes.
again like a little bit noise
You have
there
mentioned
and
that
I
the
can't
product
hear you very
manager
well.
job is not well defined in the data infrastructure or in SaaS. Can you please elaborate what's not defined or what's that blurry in it?
You have to repeat again. I'm sorry. I can't.
Okay.
Like when you speak, I don't know. You
Nice.
need to have like the microphone a little bit farther, like from your mouth, because like there's just like too much noise.
You have mentioned that the product manager job is not well defined in data infrastructure or in SaaS. Can you please elaborate?
Okay. Yeah. Okay, now that was very clear. So the problem, like in the companies that build, let's say, data infrastructure or like infrastructure in general, let's say, like it might be like network defined, like software defined networks, right? Like these products by their definition are like extremely technical. And what like the market was doing so far was using like product managers not that much as like the person who's going to identify and define and communicate like value and make sure that like we build like to deliver that value, but more like for doing the actual, like, let's say, project management. Okay, and the rest was left like to the engineering teams. And the reason for that was because, okay, like it's just like in many cases it's just like too technical. So you didn't really have like the people who were like technical enough, but at the same time had, let's say, the capacity to go and speak the business language and talk with the customers and understand like the needs and do this translation between too technical to business terms. Now, this has to change because otherwise, like the industry itself, like cannot scale, right? Like we cannot do that. Like we cannot just have like product managers that's doing just like project management. Like it's not working. Like engineers at the end cannot deliver a product. They can build and deliver technology, and that's different, right? So it is very challenging. Like for me, who I have been like involved in hiring for these positions for like almost like 10 years now, it's really hard like to find product managers that they can do that. It's not easy, even here in Silicon Valley, right? So we see that like companies are trying to solve this problem by taking product and turning it more into like project management, but they also understand that this needs to change, and we are in a process where we try to figure out like how we can do that. I'm very lucky to be able like to be working right now with some like extremely talented product managers here at Starburst that are like also like very technical, but at the same time they have like the capacity to take like something very technical as a polymorphic table function and translate that into like use cases and value that the customer will get at the end, and communicate that like to product marketing, to sales, to everyone else, and like build this engine that we need there to build at the end like the company. So the role in my opinion, like it will become like, let's say, a little bit like it's harder to become like a PM in a way, like in this space. But at the same time, like the role of the PM when it is implemented like in the right way in these companies is like much more empowered and like much more challenging and rewarding at the same time.
Thank you. We have a last question in here, or time for the last question, and that's what's the main insight you'd like all of us to have after this talk, Kostas?
What I'd like to share with you guys is that, I mean, the industry right now, I mean, I'll give you like a more of a, let's say, high level, a little bit more like strategic insight, let's say, that has to do like also with how you see your career, like what opportunities you might be looking in the future. So we, as like the tech industry is like leaving behind like a decade of like huge growth that had to do with like SaaS and SaaS applications and cloud, right? And is entering like a new, let's say, cycle where pretty much the expectation is that like a lot of innovation and like a lot of growth this time is going to come like through data. What we do with data, what products we can build on top of that, and how we can use this data to create like new markets and new products. So there are like some amazing opportunities out there. There are companies that are building like some amazing stuff. No matter where you come from, like as a product manager, like if it's like even if you come like from B2C or like mobile apps or like it doesn't really matter. Like you can find opportunities and you can like I think find like a very rewarding career also like by working like in companies that they do and they build data related products and data infrastructure. So keep that in mind. There are opportunities out there and opportunities not just like to develop yourself, but also let's say have an impact on how the role of like the product manager will be defined in this new cycle of innovation in the industry. So that's like what I would like to share with you. Feel free like to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever you want. And if you have questions or you need anything, and I'll be happy to come back.
Nice to have you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kostas. So we have a next speaker, but before we continue, I just would like to ask, do you hear clearly? In this side, it's like very clear to hear. Do you also hear what they are talking about there as well? So it works. Perfect. Great. Thank you. So the next speaker, do we have Marc somewhere around? Yes, here he is. Maybe you can show your face first, Marc. You are now sharing the presentation. But we still see Kostas, but give us a sec. I think we're gonna...
I'm here.
Yes, but we just need to... Yes, here he is. Give us a sec. We will just put you on the main. Yes, so this is Marc. So hello, Marc. Welcome. Marc is well known to us, the Product Tank organizers. He's been with Mind the Product, that is the organization in charge of these meetups for 7 years already. So I'm very glad that he had time to share something with us today. Marc is currently group product manager at Intercom. I guess most of you know Intercom, the great feedback tool, this customer support tool and stuff like the chat tool, which many of us have used. And he's been working with many digital startups and more established businesses. But Marc is in his free time, he doesn't leave the product management behind, but he spends time thinking about it and writing books about product management, which is great for us who read it, right? So, and Marc will, today he will talk about his second book, which is called Managing Products Equals Managing Tension. And he will, his presentation, his talk will be different. He will have a presentation for you. So that's, and actually one very important fact about Marc. What you see in the background is he's based in London, and what you see in the background is the subway map of London. And the thing is, this is not a Zoom background. It is like a real 3D wallpaper on his wall, which is like really important to know, because at first I didn't notice when we connected here. So that's about it. The floor is yours, and feel free to share the screen, Marc.
Cool, will do. You know, this is the customary bit where I'll be faffing around for 2 seconds just to make sure that you can see my screen and it's all working, so bear with me. So the obligatory question is, can you see my screen and can you still hear me?
Yes, we hear you and we see the screen, thanks.
Excellent, excellent. So before I go into my kind of very brief presentation, and thank you for the lovely intro, by the way. Really appreciate that. I can't see you, but I'm relying on the organizers to give me a really honest answer of the kind of show of hands that you put up when I ask you the following 2 questions. First of all, who of you in the audience, just raise your hand, feels that they had a good day today at work? All right, that's a fair number. Can see that.
Nice. Like 13 of us, which is like roughly the half, roughly the 50%.
Because you know what my next question was going to be, right? How many of you had an absolute shit day at work? This is amazing. No one had a bad day, or is just rather not say so. Because I have found that product management can be really challenging in lots of different ways. We talk a lot about managing products and what that means. We talk a lot about tools and techniques. You even heard it in Kostas's presentation, but we talk a lot less, I find, about some of the tensions and the challenges and the frustrations that can be inherent to product management. Because I found over the years that product management effectively is a combination of 3 key elements. It's the mind of us as product managers, the mind of our customers, the mind of the people that we work with within the business or outside the business, our stakeholders, people in our teams, especially if we work in cross-functional teams. There's the component of the matter. What is our product made of? Is it software code? Am I working on a car? Am I working on a piece of furniture? And then the final component of the product management equation is around moves. So the things that we do or don't do, decisions that we make in relation to our products. Now, I have found that each of these components in their own right, so mind, matter, moves, can cause a lot of tension and friction. But think about what we do on a day-to-day basis as a product manager, where effectively you've got all 3 things to manage at any given time: mind, matter, and moves. And I find that product management is not a linear process. It's not a happy path. Well, there are happy moments, shall we say, but a lot of what we do as product managers is working through different tensions and different trade-offs as we go. And that's what I would like to talk to you about today. So we'll look at some specific tensions. We'll look at the tensions listed here, and we'll go into detail of what is the tension between day-to-day versus forward-looking. Is it okay to say no? We'll talk about keeping up with the Joneses and being competitor-focused. The 4th tension that we'll look at is being part of a dysfunctional family, and I will elaborate on what that means. And we'll close off by talking about knitting spaghetti. And for each of these tensions that we'll cover today, I'll give you a bit of a description, but I'll also give you some practical tools and tips of how to mitigate those tensions. So let's start with the first tension that I've definitely experienced. And I would love to hear from you on Slido if you have any questions around this tension, which is around, and this not just this tension, but the subsequent ones as well, of course, being very much focused on the short term, the day-to-day, getting a feature over the line, writing user stories, versus being more forward-looking to say, what do we do next sprint? Or going beyond that, what are we doing in 3 months from now, or maybe 3 years from now? it's a very real tension for most of product managers, where they're constantly having to navigate between what are we doing now, what are we doing next, or what are we doing in the future. And one way to tackle this is working in a kind of dual track way. So I don't know how many of you work in this way, but effectively what you're trying to do, particularly as a product manager and often joined by the product designer, is to be one step ahead of what is being built or implemented right now. So you're doing discovery for at least the next sprint and making sure you've got enough detail of what needs to be built or improved when it gets to that sprint. So you're always one step ahead. So that's a very simple way to, again, be more forward-looking. Now, the trick with that dual track approach is that you need to be deliberate about this. You need to carve out the time to look ahead of what you want to be building in the next sprint, or what you need to learn to build a solution or to create a feature or to make an improvement in your next sprint, whether you work in 1 week cycles, 6 week cycles, 2 week cycles. But I think that dual track approach is really important if you want to start small with thinking more forward, thinking ahead. The other thing that I found really useful, especially if you've had a difficult day where you felt you were right down in the weeds, in the detail, struggling to think about, what you were going to be doing tomorrow, let alone in 10 days from now or a year from now, is to be deliberate about carving out what they call a Schultz hour. So this is George Schultz on the left, sat next to President Reagan. George Schultz was Secretary of State in Reagan's government. And he would, I think it was on a Friday, he would carve out at least an hour where no one could disturb him other than the president and Schultz's wife. And all he would do in that hour, there's no distractions other than a blank piece of paper and a pen. And he would just spend that time to just jot down any thoughts, any insights, any ideas that would come to him in that hour. Just put it down on paper. It might sound a bit esoteric, but it's really useful. I do it on a regular basis because it helps us to step away from the day-to-day and gain a new perspective or come up with new ideas. But you have to be, again, deliberate about carving out that time and making sure you've thrown your phone and anything that could distract you in the waste bin just for that hour. The second tension that we often encounter as product managers is being able to say no, and whether it's okay to say no, particularly when you work in B2B and SaaS. Kostas talked about it in enterprise. Sometimes it's really hard to say no, especially if someone comes to you with a solution that could generate a lot of new clients and a lot of new revenue. How do you say no, or how do you challenge what someone wants you to work on, you and your team in this case? The key thing I would always say, even when you are in a situation where there's a lot of solutions that you need to implement or top-down kind of instructions of what needs to be done, is at the minimum understand why. So it can be frustrating because you think, I'm a product person, I want to figure this out. I want to just understand the problem first before we even get to a solution. Sometimes we don't have that luxury, or there's other dynamics at play, but at the minimum, we should be able to assess what we're being asked and why that is, understand, and taking that a step back and saying, okay, what are the options here? A bit like George Schultz taking a step back and saying, what is happening? What is coming to my mind? Here you take a step back and saying, what are we being asked to do and why? And then saying, okay, what are the options? How can we do this? What is the trade-off? What's the impact on work that might have already been committed to on the roadmap? So at least you're in a position where, rather than just taking something as given and saying, all right, my CEO told me to do X, Y, Z, I better go on and do it. You're still doing yourself justice as a self-respected product manager by saying, well, hold on a minute, why? What's the impact? What are the options here? And coming up with a recommendation. A third tension is not seeing the wood for the trees. And that particularly happens in teams where we've got lots of different people with lots of different perspectives, different ways to solve problems, different ways of working. And I've seen both ends of this spectrum, where I've worked in teams and with people where there was a state of artificial harmony. So you would think, you would be in meetings and you think, oof, we're all in agreement, we all like each other, this is great. But then one person would leave the room and people would say, that was a shit idea, wasn't it? Apologies for my swearing, by the way. I'll try to keep an eye on it. But that was a really bad idea, right? Or that person doesn't know what he or she is talking about. Equally, I've been in teams where there was a lot of destructive conflict, where it was people would be honest about their disagreements and their feedback, but it was done in such a way that was very much focused on the person, not the idea, not the suggestion. So that maybe that works once, but in my experience, that's not something that's sustainable. So you want to be in the middle, where you want to have productive conflict, particularly in situations where, again, you have lots of different kind of perspectives. You want to be able to bring those different perspectives and different backgrounds into a conversation and really use that for good to build better products ultimately. One way of doing that is what's called conflict manipulation. And I refer to this book by Robert Fritz, who originally introduced that term. First thing to do when you want to manipulate conflict is to intensify the conflict, where you deliberately present a negative vision or any kind of unwanted consequences if action isn't taken. So this could be to say, well, if we don't act now, we're going to lose a lot of revenue, or our customers are going to walk away from us, or the customer experience is going to be really bad. You're intensifying the conflict. The next step is then to take action. This is the constructive bit. Take action to reduce that pressure. So, okay, we are in agreement that there's a negative vision here, there's a negative impact. What can we do to remove or at least reduce that negative impact from happening? Next tension is around, I dubbed it keeping up with the Joneses. So it's really about looking at what your neighbor is doing and trying to make sure you've got a car that is at least as shiny and as nice as your neighbor's car. In the world of product management, it's often about what is our competitor doing? And we should be doing with what our competitors are doing. And again, I don't know about you in the room, but I've definitely worked in organizations where there was a tendency to be blindly following competitors or be thrown every time a competitor did something. Now, the tension here is, do we slavishly follow anything and everything that a competitor does or doesn't do? Or do we carve out our own path? Where do we feel comfortable? One way to end up in the middle there and to mitigate that tension of just being either competitor obsessed rather, or completely being ignorant of what's happening around you, is doing an opportunity assessment. You might have seen this template by Marty Kagan, where it's just 10 questions that you can ask to say, should we be solving that problem? Why is it worth us solving that problem? How big is the opportunity? Again, it's a really nice set of questions you can go through each time a competitor does something. And I would argue, I would use the same kind of questions in that conversation where you might have to say no. If you go back to a few tensions that we covered earlier. Again, just asking why and understanding why it's worth following a competitor or trying to differentiate. And speaking of differentiation, I think this is really helpful template to use to do a bit of a positioning statement. So when you are coming up with a new product idea, or equally, you were thinking of an idea and a competitor has just thrown it out in the market and you're like, poof, there goes my idea. Well, not so fast. Take this kind of positioning template and understand about why is our product better? Why is there anything unique about our products that the competition doesn't have? Or do we just, again, execute better customer experience, easier onboarding? Penultimate tension that I want to cover today is, again, that being part of what I call a dysfunctional family. And I embrace this, we talk a lot about cognitive diversity, bringing people with different perspectives, different ways of working, different ways of problem solving into an organization, into a team. And that, whilst that's great, it can also cause a lot of tension because people have different perspectives or they have a different way of working. And one way of dealing with these tensions and building kind of relationships with people, even if they have a completely different perspective, they have different level of experience, we have to work with each other. We still have to build trusted relationships with each other. And one way to do that is to influence without authority. And that's definitely typical for us product managers. There are a lot of people that we need to work with cross-functionally in an organization and outside of an organization. And we need to get them on that journey, but we don't have any formal authority over them. So one way to do that is really invest in building trusted relationships with people, whether it's in your team or across the organization. And one way to do that is to understand what makes the other person tick, what is important to the other person. And if you look at this model, which comes from Cohen and Bradford, who've written a book about influencing without authority, they talk in this model about identifying relevant currencies, your currencies, what is important to you, and the currencies of the person that you're working with or dealing with. And then you start doing a currency exchange. It's a bit like traveling abroad, right? You want to understand what is important to them and how you can really work in a way and build a relationship in a way that does justice to that, whatever it is that's important to the other person. So there's a few categories there in terms of types of currency. Some people care a lot about status. So they'll love it if you go the extra mile to make them look good in front of the group or the CEO or the exec. Other people care a lot about understanding the vision of what we're trying to achieve. They really want to know the why before they start working on a particular task or a piece of work. Equally, you've got people who don't care about vision, but they're very task oriented. So anything that we can do as product managers to remove any blockers, give them any information so that they can do their task better or more efficiently is hugely appreciated. But the point with this model is that understanding those currencies will help you to build trusted relationships with people that might be completely different, do different things, and have different backgrounds. In another way of thinking about that is how do you build up trust using this kind of trust equation? And the thing that's most interesting, if you look at this trust equation, which was created by a company called the Trusted Advisor, things like building up credibility, being reliable, being intimate in a non-romantic kind of way, but just building up those relationships, but also the self-orientation bit, the awareness of your own style of managing or working with people, awareness of the currencies that are important to you. Knitting spaghetti is the final tension that I've definitely seen in product management, where a lot of people that we work with, maybe some people, in the room, we want certainty, we want clarity, we want a clear process. But product management is probably one of the most uncertain things that there is, in the sense that there are lots of unknowns. You're talking about creativity, which is not a set, linear, certain process. So how do we navigate through it? How do we bring that out in people where people are not feeling kind of thrown or frustrated by the kind of lack of clarity, or enjoying working through a bit of uncertainty? One way is to have productive conflicts, which we touched on earlier, and really focus on the task at hand, where it's safe to have a different perspective or to throw a bit of a curveball and come up with an alternative solution. It's actually encouraged to have a difference of opinion, about the task or challenge at hand. It's safe to disagree. And doing that is, as long as you can do that on the kind of banner of we're all here for the same thing. We have a shared purpose. It can be a product vision, a problem that we're trying to solve for a customer. But that's a really good backdrop against which you can have productive conflict about how to go about that, achieving that vision or that shared purpose. The key thing is, and this is typically where we as product managers come in, is we will need to get to a stage where you might disagree and we still have to commit. A technique that I've used in the past is ritual dissent. And ritual dissent is really the goal of an exercise like that, is that you want to encourage people to disagree and to disagree about the task, but not about the person. You don't want it to become personal. It's purely about, I don't think this is the right way to go about achieving our vision or solving a problem. And what happens in this kind of exercise is that the person presenting an idea, can be a product manager, can be a designer, presents with their back facing the people listening. So they can't see what kind of conversations are happening. They can't see even just the facial expressions as that person is presenting. And again, you can do this virtually as well. But the goal here is that you're creating a space where it's okay to have dissent because it's focused on the idea, not on the presenter. And another technique to use to really bring out a bit of challenge, different ideas, is by conducting what's called a pre-mortem. I'm sure you've done a post-mortem where you delivered a product, brought it to market, or completed a project, and you get together with people involved in that product or project and you reflect on lessons learned and what we could do differently next time. With the pre-mortem, you bring that moment forward. So you start talking about the things that could potentially go wrong. So you could say, I've done an exercise where I would say, what do we need to get wrong for this product to fail within a year's time? And what is really useful is that this is an exercise where you can talk in a very safe space because you haven't made those mistakes just yet. So there's no pointing fingers, and you can do that cross-functionally. So you can look at the risks through a number of kind of different perspectives. So I've done this with people from marketing in the room where they say, well, this product could fail if we don't get our sales enablement training right. You could have people from finance in the room or from legal in the room. So you can really look at it and prioritize certain risks to mitigate based on different perspectives. So we've looked at a number of tensions. We looked at the nature of those tensions, and I've given you some tools and techniques to manage those tensions better going forward. But the three key things I would like you to take away from what we've just covered is the importance of being able to take a step back, whether that's through that Schultz hour, 1 hour a week, where you look at a blank piece of paper, or you take the time to understand where another person is coming from. Second thing is investing in trusted relationships. You don't have to be best friends. You don't have to come to each other's birthday parties, but we're all accountable for the same outcome, which is delivering value to customers. And we need to have trusted relationships to do that. So it's a really important thing to invest in constantly. And the final thing is, I would like you to reflect on how you currently encourage constructive disagreement, where people can bring different perspectives, different ideas to the table, and it's safe to challenge. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marc. Do you hear me? Does it work with a mic, or are there any issues? Do you hear
Yeah,
me
it does work. I was going to say drop it in the chat, but actually I can hear you, I can see you, so we're all good. I'm hoping for some good questions.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the what you just said about the product management situation. I sort of agreed or found myself in 4 out of 6 things you mentioned, at least once in my career. So like this was like a pretty on point analysis. So thank you for that. So we have some questions in Slido, but first, are there any more questions here in the audience? So I can. Do you want to ask? Or should I move on?
You know what you should do? You should ask again, and really honestly, if people want to come back on what they said earlier about whether they had a good or a bad day, knowing about some of the tensions we covered. Anyway, just an aside.
Yes. So are there any more questions here? If not, then let's get to Slido. So the first question I would like to ask is, so let's say I'm at the stage in our company when I think either our way or doing things changes or I'll have to leave. Any advice on diagnosing the situation, and does it relate to any of the tensions you mentioned?
Yeah, so one tension that we haven't talked about, and again, I don't know the person who's asked the question, what the kind of changes he or she is looking for. But one of the tensions is obviously we as product managers, we want to go in a certain direction, and we work in an organization, we work with people who might not want to go in that same direction. Now, the key thing I would say to this person asking the question is, do you feel you've done everything within your power to take people on a journey in the direction that you want to go in to, from a product management perspective, maybe from a collaboration point of view? And again, because my advice is always start small. So for example, I'll give you a dumb example. I've worked in organizations where I was like, no one talks to the customer here. And there was real resistance to speaking to the customer. Now I could have said, it's not going to work. They don't believe in the customer. They believe in their own ideas. But very small steps, getting me talking to the customer, having people just watching the video afterwards, made a massive difference. Now, it might be that the person who's asked this question has done all the steps, hasn't seen any progress in the right direction, then it's time to leave. But I think it's always, again, because these frustrations are, they are so, I think, forget about all the great books and the kind of poster boys of product management. And yes, I work for one, but I can tell you, even at Intercom, there's always going to be challenges. There's going to be tensions and frustrations. I think I would flip the question almost as like, we as product managers, do we feel that we've done our bit in trying to influence that direction or influence what's happening from a product point of view? And if we feel that we have done it and with no discernible kind of impact, yes, then it might be time to leave. But I often find that there's a lot of things that we can do, even if it means starting small. Someone is leaving already. I think it doesn't work for them, clearly.
Yes, maybe. So the next question is from Tom, and it's a good question. I like it. I'm just picking a bit. I'm first choosing the questions which are directly related to our talk. The next question is: any advice on how to encourage a bit juniorish team members to step up and disagree with PM on refinement sessions? How to remove the aura of PM is always right?
Yeah, PM is never right. I can see smiling faces. We are never right. Trust me. Yes, we know I need to have all the answers as a product manager, but I don't. Right. And I think particularly in the dynamic with the more junior product manager, we have to lead by example. So I think it's really healthy. And I had to learn this the hard way because I was one of those people, and I still suffer from this at times where I think, of course, I'm 95 years old. I've been a product manager for 10 plus years. I need to have the answers, but it's much more empowering to say, I don't know. And your junior product manager or product owner who's seeing that will give the confidence and say, actually, it's okay to say, I don't know. Right? The other thing I would also encourage is, even if that person might find it a bit of a challenge to challenge and to say no or to disagree, is give that person some tools to ask questions. So they're not taking a position, but they will say to a senior stakeholder or product manager, can you explain to me why why that is, or how would you go about this, or what does it mean? What if this were to happen, right? So it's rather than just being super confrontational or saying no, you're giving that more junior person the tools to challenge constructively. See, no one left in the room, so hopefully that's a good sign. There's a question in the room I can see.
Was there a question in the room?
Yes, I saw someone raising a finger. That's it.
It was thumbs up, so maybe this answer was of yours was more satisfying.
Okay, that was the person asking the question. Sorry, next question. See, I shouldn't try to read the room.
No
Can't do that virtually.
No worries. There's another question. One of the things that causes a lot of frustration for me, someone from the audience, not me, okay, is the ad hoc tasks requested and random ideas we immediately follow. Any advice how to handle that, Marc?
Yeah, I think I covered that in the session where I talked about, saying no, or at a minimum, at least asking why. Where does this random ad hoc task come from? The reality is that we still might have to do it. I've been in situations where people said, literally drop everything that we're doing on product A because we're going to go all in on product B. And that's not the thing you want to hear as a product manager. And equally, I find myself in times where I have to tell other product managers, like, stop what you're doing because we're going to change the remit of the team. But at the minimum, we should really, before we start working on it, understand why. And that's not just for our own benefit. So we at least feel we understand why we have to change tasks or change focus, but also for the people in our team that we need to explain why we're doing this, why there's a direction, change in direction. So at a minimum, as frustrating as it can be, understand the why. And I can also give you examples where by just asking why we're doing this, or what the thinking is behind the change in direction or behind the task that we're asked to do, I can actually come up with maybe alternative tasks, or we found out that we didn't even have to do the tasks because we were already doing it. But again, rather than just going down and do it, just head down and starting to do it.
That's a very good advice. I use this strategy quite often, and when someone comes with this ad hoc super fast idea, the asking why is like super simple way how to sort of
yes,
understand.
and maybe to add, and that's why I shared that kind of, if you remember seeing that opportunity assessment, those 10 questions that the mighty Marty Kagan has come up with. Again, if you don't want to be seen as annoying because people don't ask like you know, asking why 5 times kind of thing, those are nice questions to say, why do we need to do this now, or why is this important, how will we make money? Those kind of questions will get you a good conversation at least.
Perfect. We have a question from Dave, who asks, being Dutch myself, hoi, isn't this constructive conflict just a way for us to get away with our nature? How do you know you have reached some balance?
Hey Dave, hoe is het jongen? Volgens mij zag ik jou rondlopen in het dingetje, maar to answer the question in English, I think constructive conflict, because that's the thing, that's not what I think what Dave is describing is not constructive conflict. It's not an opportunity for us to be Dutch, because you should know about Dutch people. They are really fucking direct. They swear a lot. They will be direct. I live in the UK. I can't get away with being Dutch, right? What constructive conflict is about is creating an environment where it's safe to speak up, but in a way that doesn't offend people. And I know from experience, and again, that's a culture class, which I think Dave is alluding to, if I was just being Dutch in the UK, that wouldn't be seen as very constructive. It would be seen as offensive. And trust me, I've made that mistake. So for me, it's much more about creating a space and encouraging disagreement, but in such a way that isn't seen as offensive and also isn't seen as focused on the person, but really about focused on an idea or the greater good of what we're trying to achieve as a team or as an organization.
Great. Like Mark, actually, I didn't know you were Dutch originally, and from your behavior, I was judging you were more close to the British nature. You are extremely polite. You thank a lot and stuff. So you are able to cover your origin like in a very good way. You seem like
Yeah, I've
extremely.
learned. Trust me, I've learned the hard way. I've made all the mistakes in the book.
Okay, so I think we have time like for last two questions. First one, not super directly related to your talk, but it's related to your work. So, or your previous book. And the question is, can you name some of your favorite product management tools? Thank you. For those of you who don't know, Mark's first book was called My Product Management Toolkit. So he's an expert on the topic of product management tools.
Right. Well, I can give you one to start with, which is assumptions and hypotheses. So I don't know. Can I see a quick show of hands in the room? How many people actively use assumptions and hypotheses? 2, 3, 4-ish. Well, if you haven't used it before, it's a really nice way, again, because we talk a lot about experimentation and test and learn. But even if you don't work for a B2C kind of test and learn kind of company, I think it's really important. And there's a great book, that's where I learned about this technique, called Lean UX by Jeff Gotthelf and Josh Seiden, where they do talk about, okay, what do we assume about about this idea and why we think it's a good idea? What do we assume about our customers? And by just asking those questions and really looking at the, assumptions, like we assume that this will make us money. Simplest product assumption that we can have, right? We assume that customers will buy this. We assume that our customer is 25 years old, lives in an urban city, yada, yada, yada. How do you know is the question I always want to answer, and ask and answer. And this technique of breaking that down into assumptions and then a hypothesis to say, we know that we're true we know that our assumptions hold true if we see this signal from the market or this product adoption, is a super helpful technique to both prioritize your product iterations, but also your product decisions. Right? That's one technique. The other, can I have I'm sure you want to go back to the bar. One other technique that's specific to road mapping, which I liked a lot, is goal-oriented road mapping. So my friend Roman Pitchler has written a book about it, which is called Strategize. But when he first told me about, don't, forget about your roadmap with your milestones and your timings and just a bunch of features, really useful, especially if you think about the roadmap as a communication and a collaboration tool, to think about what goal do we want to achieve. If that's clear on your roadmap, you can even leave the features aside in most cases. You really say to your team and to your business, these are the goals that we're going to focus on in this order.
Okay, thank you. And there is like one last question which has like most votes, and it's not directly related to what we've been talking about, but this is a question which really comes up super often. So I don't know if you feel comfortable answering it, like how do you do it? But the question is very simple. Like, what criteria do you use to prioritize features? It's like a crucial question. So if you feel like sharing a bit on how you do it, so that would be good. Or we can choose a different question. There are like some left. So
I'm happy to give an answer, but you know which answer I was going to give first, right? Which is the absolute classic product manager answer. 2 words. What answer was I going to give? What do you think? It depends.
Yes.
I know that won't do for this audience. The way I like to prioritize, because obviously we can look at Moscow, and I like RICE as a prioritization method, if you've ever come across that. But keeping it simple, and going back to what I said earlier about assumptions and hypotheses, is which of these features, problems to solve, ideas, do we believe will have the biggest impact on a particular outcome that we're trying to achieve for our customer and for our business? So again, we've got a bunch of ideas. Which one do we believe will have the biggest impact on our customer, the outcomes that they want to achieve? They want to do more of something, less of something, and as a result, on our business. Right? And this is where metrics come in, where you say, this is the key metric we want to hit. Again, you start with just, even if you don't have evidence, but just really as a group understanding what, I showed it, that slide right at the beginning where I talked about looking forward and looking at the right now, is typically when you look at product roadmaps or ideas, there's always a mix of what I call big bets and quick wins. So big bet is something that we think will have a massive impact on an outcome that we're trying to achieve for the customer and for our business, but also typically a lot of uncertainty, a lot of complexity, and a lot of kind of effort required to achieve that big bet, versus a quick win where, yes, probably easier to do, less complex, less effort required, but also less impact on the outcome that we're trying to achieve for a customer, for our business. Does that make sense? See, this is where I can't read the room, where people are thinking, I need a drink, or yeah, that does make sense. That's actually quite a nice way of prioritizing before getting into techniques. So you tell me.
It seems to make sense. So thank you very much, Marc. Thank you very much for your presentation and your answers. It was great to have you here.
My pleasure.
And have an awesome evening. And thanks once again. Bye.
Thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed it. Take care.
So now the organized sort of schedule or program is over. So it's time to go to the bar and finish what's left, do some networking. And at some point, or very soon actually, here you should see a survey about this meetup, which you can just sort of scan and let us know and answer some of the questions which are there. So enjoy, have a great time, and hopefully see you around in the future. Bye. See you. Bye.